Alpha King signed marriage contract blindly, but one look at his bride and his wolf fell to its knees. The night sky over the Wolfen Court was darker than usual, as if the stars themselves were afraid to watch what was about to unfold. High atop the obsidian spires, King Kalen stood alone on the balcony, his cloak billowing like a shadow in the cold wind. The kingdom below whispered with secrets, its streets empty save for the occasional guard patrolling under the pale moonlight. Kalen's amber eyes, sharp as the talons of a hunting hawk, scanned the horizon. Tonight he had signed a marriage contract, a bond he had agreed to without ever seeing the woman he would marry. Duty had always been stronger than desire for Kalen. The Wolfen Court was a kingdom of power, a land where loyalty and strength mattered above all else. Yet even as he reminded himself of this, a flicker of doubt crept into his mind. He had felt the paper beneath his fingers, the wax seal pressing cold against his palm, and he had not hesitated. But now, knowing she would soon arrive, his instincts whispered a warning he could not ignore. Far away, in a carriage drawn by black horses with eyes like coals, Lady Alara traveled toward the castle. The night seemed alive around her, the trees bowing and twisting as if they sensed the weight of the journey. She had heard stories of the Wolfen Court, the fierce King Kalen, the legends of his wolf form, and the dark magic that haunted his halls. Yet, despite the fear that pressed against her chest, Ilara's steps were guided by courage. Her eyes, the color of storm-tossed seas, remained focused ahead, hiding the tremor of anticipation that no noblewoman could fully conceal. When the carriage finally arrived at the towering gates of the Wolfen Court, the guards bowed but said nothing. They had heard of the Alpha King's ways, how even the slightest wrong glance could earn a man's wrath. Alara stepped down carefully, her hands folded over her skirts, her heart drumming with equal parts fear and wonder. The courtyard stretched before her, a labyrinth of shadows, fountains, and stone statues that seemed to watch her every move. Kalen had waited there, cloaked in darkness, his wolf instincts already stirring at the scent of her presence. When she finally stepped into the moonlight, he saw her for the first time. It was a simple glance, a moment that could have been lost in a heartbeat. Yet it rooted him to the spot. Her beauty was not the kind of perfection one read about in poems. It was something wilder, something that belonged more to the forest than the court, and it stirred something in him he had never named. The wolf within him, the beast that had always answered only to duty and hunger, tilted its head in quiet awe. Alara, unaware of the silent scrutiny, allowed herself to breathe in the scent of the castle, the cold stone, the faint burn of candle wax, and something richer, darker, something that made her heart skip. She did not bow immediately. She did not speak either. Something in the air between them demanded that words be kept silent, that the space itself speak first. "You are Alara," Kalen said finally, his voice low and measured, though it trembled slightly in a way that betrayed his control. "I am," she replied, her tone steady though her pulse raced. "And you are Kalen, the Alpha King of Wolfen Court." He nodded once, and in that simple gesture, 1,000 thoughts passed through his mind. He had imagined many things about her, her voice, her expression, her presence, but none of them matched the reality. It was not just her appearance that startled him, but the quiet strength she carried, the way her gaze met his without fear, and yet without submission. A silence stretched between them, heavy as the night itself. The courtiers watched from the edges of the courtyard, curious, cautious, but Kalen barely noticed. His mind was caught in a storm of something unfamiliar: longing, caution, and an instinctive pull toward this woman who had been nothing more than a name on a contract hours ago. "Come," he said finally, turning toward the palace. "You will stay in the East Wing. Guards will ensure your comfort and your safety." Elora followed, her skirts whispering across the marble floors, her eyes never leaving his form. She noticed the way his shoulders moved, how the tension in his jaw betrayed the calm exterior, and the faint glint of amber in his eyes that hinted at the beast within. She had been warned of his wolf nature, of the magic that had long bound him to both man and beast, but seeing it in him now, so close, made the tales real. Inside the palace, the corridors were lit with torches, the shadows dancing against walls lined with ancestral portraits. Each face seemed to watch her as she passed, eyes following, lips set in silent judgment. Yet Kaelin never faltered. He led her to her chamber, a room of silver and dark wood, where moonlight spilled through tall windows, catching the dust like stars scattered across the floor. "You will find everything you need here," he said, his voice softer than before, almost human, almost vulnerable. "Tomorrow, we will begin the formalities. Tonight, rest." Elara nodded, but neither of them moved. Something lingered in the air, a tension neither could name. Kaelin's wolf stirred, restless, sensing the magic that flowed through her veins. Alara's pulse quickened, feeling the silent weight of a predator and a king watching her every move. Then, without warning, a distant howl split the night. It was not a wolf of the forest, but something darker, older, tied to the court's cursed past. Kaelin's eyes narrowed, and the wolf within him growled low in his chest. Elara felt it too, a tremor of fear that she refused to acknowledge aloud. "It has begun," Kaelin whispered, more to himself than to her. "What has?" Elara asked, her voice steady despite the cold that ran through her veins. "The shadows that haunt this kingdom," he replied. "And perhaps the shadows that haunt me." His gaze softened for the briefest moment, a flicker of vulnerability that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Elara did not speak. She sensed that words could not touch the meaning of this moment. Outside, the wind whispered through the towers, carrying secrets of old curses and unspoken bonds. Inside, the tension between the king and the woman he had not yet known was heavier than any chain, thicker than any steel. Night deepened. The moon rose higher, casting silver light across the courtyard. Kaelin returned to the balcony, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the forest met the mountains. Elara watched him from her window, feeling a strange pull, a connection she could not yet understand, a bond that was older than the kingdom itself. Somewhere in the distance, a shadow moved. A whisper of wind, a stir of leaves. Elara shivered, though it was not the cold that touched her. She thought of the stories her mother had told her as a child, of wolves that were men, of kings who ruled with both strength and fury, of curses that could twist hearts and bind souls. Never had she imagined she would step into such a tale herself. Kaelin, sensing her gaze even across the distance, turned his head slightly. The wolf within him tilted its ears, sniffing the night, restless and alert. It was as if it knew that this woman, so calm and yet so full of hidden fire, would change everything. The thought frightened him more than any enemy he had faced on the battlefield. By the time the first light of dawn touched the spires of the Wolfen Court, Neither Kaelin nor Elara had slept. They had remained apart physically, yet somehow closer than either had imagined possible. The night had whispered promises neither dared speak aloud, and the shadows of the past lingered just beyond their reach, waiting. And then it happened. A messenger arrived at the east wing, bowing low to Elara. In his hands, a sealed parchment burned with a strange energy that made her fingers tingle. The seal bore the crest of an old enemy, a family thought long gone but whose magic had never truly faded. Hilera held the parchment, her breath catching. Kaelin appeared behind her, his presence like a wall of fire and shadow. His amber eyes were wide, the wolf beneath the surface growling at the danger he sensed. "What is it?" he demanded, his voice taut with tension. Elara broke the seal. Her eyes widened as she read the words, her heart hammering. The letter was a warning, but also a promise, an awakening of something ancient, something tied to her own hidden powers, and something that could destroy the fragile bond forming between her and the king. Kaelin stepped closer, his hand brushing hers, a spark of warmth and danger passing between them. "Then we have no choice," he said quietly, a growl beneath his words, "but to face it together." Outside, the first rays of sun fell on the castle walls, but the darkness that had followed them from the night remained. And in that lingering shadow, both the king and the woman who had captured his wolf's attention knew one truth: their story had only just begun. The castle doors creaked open to the morning wind, carrying whispers of power, desire, and danger. And as Kaelin's eyes met Elara's one last time before the day began, the wolf within him sank to its knees, not in surrender, but in awe. Because the woman who had arrived as a name on a contract had become something more than a bride. She had become the first spark of a flame that might one day consume both their hearts, or forge them into something stronger than either had ever imagined. And somewhere in the forest beyond, the shadows stirred, waiting for the moment when the king and his bride would face the truth that could bind them forever or shatter them apart. The sun rose over the Wolfen Court, painting the spires with gold and silver. Its light seemed gentle, yet beneath its beauty lay shadows the daylight could not chase away. Inside the palace, King Kaelin moved like a wolf poised on the edge of a hunt. His amber eyes were sharper than ever, alert for any danger, any threat. But there was another presence that made him restless, the woman who had arrived yesterday, whose name had already begun to echo in his mind, whose very essence stirred a fire in the wolf within him. Lady Elara had not slept through the night. She had spent hours pacing her chamber, the sealed parchment burning in her thoughts like a living thing. The letter had warned of an ancient power tied to her bloodline, a power capable of awakening the curse that had haunted the Wolfen Court for generations. It had spoken of shadows, whispers, and a choice that would come sooner than she could imagine. Yet fear did not dominate her heart. Courage did. Elara had been raised to face challenges without bending, and though the castle felt like a labyrinth of whispers and watchful eyes, she would not shrink. She looked in the mirror, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face, and saw more than herself. She saw a woman chosen by fate, bound to a king she barely knew, and to a destiny far larger than she could yet comprehend. Kaelin found her in the courtyard later that morning, practicing swordplay with a trainer. His eyes traced her movements, not with judgment, but with fascination. Every step she took, every swing of the blade, spoke of a precision and power that surprised him. It was as if she carried within her a rhythm only he could sense, a rhythm that stirred the wolf sleeping inside him. "Elara," Kalen said, his voice breaking through the crisp morning air. She paused mid-swing, turning to face him. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing her head slightly, though her eyes never wavered. He studied her silently, the wolf within him restless and alert. "You are stronger than I expected," he said finally, a note of admiration threading his words. "Perhaps stronger than this court is ready for." "Strength alone is not enough, Your Majesty. Wisdom, caution, and courage must walk together." Kalen felt a stir in his chest at her words. So few had ever spoken to him with such honesty and yet with such subtle defiance. The wolf growled low, unsettled by the pull between respect and something deeper, something dangerous. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden movement near the palace gates. A cloaked figure slipped through the shadows, moving with the silent grace of someone who had been trained to remain unseen. The guards, loyal and alert, attempted to intercept, but the figure vanished before they could reach him. Kalen's eyes narrowed. "The shadows move faster than we thought," he muttered, his voice low, almost a growl. "It is time we learn more about the threat hidden in this kingdom." Elara approached his side, her gaze steady. "Then we should begin," she said. "I will help you, if you allow it." Kalen glanced at her, uncertainty flickering across his features. He had always ruled alone, trusted few, and relied on his wolf instincts more than any counsel. Yet something in Elara compelled him to nod. "Very well, but understand this. Whatever path we choose will be dangerous. One misstep, and we may not survive." Elara's eyes held a quiet fire. "I have faced dangers before, and I will face them again. If it is with you, I will not falter." And so they began their investigation together. The first clue led them to the palace archives, a vast chamber of books, scrolls, and ancient artifacts where the air smelled of dust, ink, and the faint tang of magic. Elara ran her fingers along the spines of the books, feeling the power within them. Her own magic, subtle but strong, reacted to the older energies, awakening memories long buried. Kalen watched her closely. The wolf within him prowled the edges of his mind, alert and uneasy. There was something about the way she moved, the way she handled the ancient texts, that stirred not only admiration but a deep, unnameable longing. "Here," Elara said, pulling out a thick leather-bound tome. She opened it carefully, revealing pages of symbols, diagrams, and incantations written in a hand older than the castle itself. "This speaks of the shadow wolf," she said, pointing to a diagram. "It is bound to the bloodline of your kingdom, tied to your ancestors, but it also speaks of a force that can control it, force that I believe lies within me." Kalen leaned over her shoulder, his warm breath brushing her hair. The wolf growled softly in his chest, sensing the danger in the magic and the pull he felt toward her. "You believe you can control it?" he asked, his voice taut with tension. Elara met his gaze steadily. "I do not yet know if I can, but I will try." "I must." For a long moment they stood close, their faces inches apart, the air between them charged with something neither fully understood. Then, as if the castle itself sensed the rising tension, the shadows deepened around them, moving like living things along the stone walls. He moved first, a protective gesture, placing his hand lightly on her shoulder. "We are not safe here," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Come with me." They left the archives, moving through hallways where the torches flickered as though whispering secrets. Outside, the courtyard was empty now, the guards having retreated to their posts. The moonlight bathed the stones in silver, casting long, shifting shadows. "You should not have come alone," Kaelin said, glancing at her. "Even a step without caution can awaken the curse." Elara looked at him, her eyes steady, unafraid. "I am not afraid of the curse," she said softly. "I am afraid of inaction. And I will not let fear rule me." The wolf within Kaelin growled low. It was rare for him to hear a human voice so calm in the presence of danger, so steady against fear. He felt drawn to her courage, and in that draw, a bond began to form, a fragile, unspoken thread connecting them, tighter than any chain, stronger than any fear. Suddenly, the shadows in the courtyard shifted violently. A figure, half seen and twisted in shape, emerged from the darkness. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural red light, and its movements were fluid, animal, and yet impossible. Kaelin's stance shifted immediately, the wolf within him surfacing, muscles tensing, instincts sharpening. "Stay behind me," he commanded, though he knew she would not move. Elara stepped forward, her hands glowing faintly with a soft silver light. The magic that had lain dormant within her now rose, responding to the threat, binding itself to her will. "I will not hide," she said, her voice steady. "We face it together." The shadow wolf hissed, circling them, testing, taunting. Kaelin's amber eyes blazed as he growled, and his form shifted subtly, subtle enough to hint at the wolf beneath the king, a presence that made the shadows pause. Together they faced the creature. Alara's magic pulsed like the rhythm of a heart, and Kaelin's strength, both human and wolf, surrounded them like a shield. For a moment the shadows hesitated, as if sensing the unusual bond forming between them, a connection stronger than fear, stronger than instinct. Then the shadow disappeared into the darkness, leaving only a faint echo of its growl behind. Both of them stood in the courtyard, breathing heavily, aware of the danger, but also aware of the unspoken understanding growing between them. Kaelin turned to her, the wolf retreating but leaving its residue, a sharp, restless energy that lingered in his eyes. "You are unlike any I have known," he said quietly. Elara smiled faintly, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "And you are unlike any king I have ever met," she replied. "Perhaps that is why we are meant to face this together." For a long moment they simply stood, the cool night air washing over them, the castle silent save for the whispers of the wind. Somewhere, deep in the forest, the shadows stirred, sensing the power of their bond, knowing that the first dance between the wolf and the rose had begun. Kaelin felt something shift inside him, a tension that was no longer just about duty, no longer just about fear. The wolf within him, for the first time in years, felt something close to awe, close to reverence. And he realized with a startling clarity that Elara was not merely a bride by contract. She was the spark of something new, something that could awaken not only the kingdom but the deepest corners of his own heart. Elara, standing beside him, felt the same pull. She had come here for courage, for duty, and yet she found herself drawn into something far more profound, a connection that was dangerous, intoxicating, and necessary. And as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, painting the spires in gold once more, they both knew one truth. The shadows would return, stronger than ever, and when they did, the bond between the wolf and the woman would be tested in ways neither could yet imagine. But for now, in the quiet of the Wolfen court, a king and his bride had begun their dance, one of power, trust, longing, and secrets that would shape the fate of the kingdom. The moon rose high above the Wolfen court, spilling silver light across the cold stone walls. Shadows stretched and twisted, seeming almost alive. Inside the castle, King Kalen moved silently through the corridors, his senses sharp, his wolf instincts alert. Something had changed since yesterday, since Alara had begun uncovering the secrets of the Shadow Wolf. The castle itself seemed uneasy, as if it could sense the danger awakening from the depths of its history. Alara, too, felt the shift. Her magic, once calm and hidden, now pulsed in her veins like a living heartbeat. The parchment warning of her bloodline had been only the beginning. Ancient forces, older than the castle, older than the mountains surrounding the kingdom, were stirring. She walked the halls with purpose, her eyes sharp, her thoughts racing. She was no longer merely a visitor or a bride by contract. She was a guardian of something far greater than herself. Kalen found her in the east wing, standing before an arched window, gazing into the forest beyond. The silver light of the moon caught the edges of her hair, turning it into a halo of shadow and gold. He watched her quietly for a moment, feeling the wolf inside him stir at her presence, at the calm determination in her eyes. "Elara," he said, his voice low and careful. She turned to him, her gaze meeting his. "Kalen," she replied. "The shadows, they are moving faster now. I can feel it in the air, in the stones of the castle itself. Something is awakening." Kalen's amber eyes narrowed. The wolf beneath his skin growled softly. "Then we must face it," he said. "Tonight." They left the palace together, moving through the courtyard where moonlight met darkness in a delicate balance. The air was crisp, the wind carrying the scent of pine and wet earth from the forests beyond. Somewhere in the distance a howl echoed, not a natural wolf, but something deeper, something older. The sound made Kalen's muscles tense, and even Alara shivered despite her courage. The shadows in the forest moved, coiling and twisting as if aware of their approach. Kalen's hand brushed hers, a silent reassurance, a promise that he would protect her, even if it meant facing the beast alone. Alara felt the warmth of his touch, the strength beneath it, and a strange calm settled over her. She had never been close to a king like this, never felt a presence so powerful yet so protective. Suddenly a figure emerged from the darkness, a creature of shadow, tall and twisted, with eyes that glowed a deep crimson. Its movements were fluid and unnatural, and it exuded a presence that chilled the bone. Kalen stepped forward instinctively, his body shifting subtly, his wolf instincts surfacing, muscles coiling like springs. Alara raised her hands, a faint silver glow emanating from her fingers. Her magic, awakened by the threat and by her bloodline, responded to the danger. "We face it together," she said firmly, her voice steady, even as her heart raced. The shadow wolf hissed, circling them, testing their courage. Kalen's eyes blazed amber, the wolf within growling, ready to strike. The air between them crackled with tension, a mixture of magic, power, and unspoken emotion. Elara stepped closer to Kalen, letting the glow from her hands merge with the strength of his presence. She felt a bond forming, fragile but undeniable, linking them in ways neither fully understood. Their combined power made the shadows hesitate, confused by the strength of their unity. The creature lunged, a blur of darkness and teeth, and Kalen reacted instantly, blocking its path with a speed that was almost supernatural. His wolf instincts guided every movement, every strike. Elara's magic flared, forming a barrier of silver light that struck the creature with a force that made it stagger. Together they pushed the shadow back, a perfect dance of strength and magic, predator and protector. Yet the shadow wolf was not easily defeated. With a final, furious howl, it dissolved into a mist of darkness, retreating into the forest. Kalen's breathing was heavy, his amber eyes scanning the tree line, alert for any sign of return. Elara lowered her hands, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "It is stronger than I imagined," she admitted. Kalen turned to her, the wolf inside him subsiding but leaving a restless energy behind. "You are stronger than I imagined," he replied quietly. His voice, low and intimate, carried a weight of admiration that made her cheeks warm. For a long moment they simply stood together, the moonlight washing over them, the forest silent once more. Then Kalen spoke, his voice almost a whisper. "Elara, the bond between us, it is not just chance. There is something older than this castle, older than my family, that has brought us together." "I know," she said softly. "I feel it too. But the question is, will it be enough to face what is coming?" Kylan's gaze hardened. "It must be." The night deepened and the forest seemed to close in around them. They returned to the castle in silence, the weight of their shared understanding pressing against their hearts. Inside, the corridors were quiet, but the shadows lingered, moving like whispers along the walls. In the east wing, Elara found the old tome again, its pages open to diagrams and symbols of magic she was only beginning to understand. Kalen leaned over her shoulder, studying the intricate designs. "This speaks of control," he said. "Control over the shadow, over the curse. But it is dangerous. One mistake." Elara looked up at him. "I will not make a mistake," she said, her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "I will learn. I will master it. For the kingdom and for you." Kalen's heart, long hardened by duty and solitude, felt an unfamiliar ache. The wolf within him stirred at her words, at the sincerity in her eyes. He realized with a clarity that frightened him that he had never cared for anyone like this before, not as a protector, not as a king, and certainly not as a wolf. Suddenly, the castle trembled, a low vibration that shook the walls and rattled the torches. Shadows pooled in the corners, thickening, swirling. The air grew heavy, and a whisper of voices, ancient and cruel, brushed against their minds. "The curse," Kalen muttered, his voice strained. "It is awake." Elara's eyes widened, but she did not step back. She felt the surge of power within her, responding to the awakening, linking her blood to the shadow wolf. "Then we face it," she said, her voice firm. "Together." The shadow wolf appeared again, more massive this time, its form darker, almost solid, its eyes burning like embers. It moved with speed and precision, testing them, probing for weakness. Kalen shifted fully, the wolf within him surfacing, his instincts merging with his human mind. He moved with a fluidity that was terrifying and beautiful, a predator and a king in one. Elara stepped beside him, her magic forming a shield, a silver glow that intertwined with his power. They moved as one, their bond allowing them to anticipate each other's movements, countering the shadow's attacks, pushing back against the darkness. Yet the creature was relentless. It struck with a force that made the ground shake, forcing Kalen to protect Elara with every ounce of strength he possessed. A low growl rumbled from his chest, the wolf in him rising in fury, matching the shadow wolf blow for blow. Alara's magic flared again, stronger this time, her hands glowing with light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The shadow wolf recoiled, sensing the bond between them, a force it could not break. Yet it did not retreat. Instead, it whispered threats, dark promises of pain and separation, testing their courage and their trust in one another. Kalen's amber eyes met hers, and in that glance they shared something unspoken: fear, determination, and a spark of something deeper, something that went beyond the battlefield. The wolf inside him knelt, not in submission, but in reverence for the strength standing beside him. With a final, united effort, they struck the shadow wolf together. Alara's magic and Kalen's strength converged, a wave of silver light and raw power that forced the creature to dissolve into mist once more, retreating into the darkness beyond the castle walls. Breathing heavily, Kalen lowered his hands, his wolf form receding but leaving a restless energy behind. Elara collapsed to her knees, exhausted but alive, her magic spent. He reached for her, lifting her gently to her feet, his amber eyes softening with a tenderness he had never shown anyone. "You are remarkable," he whispered. "Stronger than I could have imagined." Elara smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And you..." "More than I expected, Kalen. Strong, fierce, and yet capable of care," the wolf within him growled softly, content in its vigilance but aware that this bond, this connection with Elara, had become something sacred, something that could not be broken by shadows or curses. Yet outside, in the forests beyond the castle, the darkness stirred. The shadow wolf was not gone. It had retreated, yes, but it had also learned. It had marked the bond between the king and the woman, and it waited for the moment when it could strike again. Inside the castle, Kalen and Elara stood together, united by strength, trust, and the unspoken bond that had begun to form between them. They knew the curse was not defeated, only delayed. And as the first light of dawn touched the spires once more, they realized one truth. The challenges ahead would test not only their strength, but the very hearts that had begun to beat in unison. And in that realization, both felt the stirrings of something more, a connection that went beyond duty, beyond fear, beyond the shadows. It was a spark of hope, of love, and of courage, rising in the midst of darkness, waiting for the trials yet to come. The Wolfen Court lay silent beneath the silver glow of a full moon. Its spires and towers gleamed like obsidian, casting long shadows that seemed to move as if alive. Inside the castle, King Kalen paced the hallways, the wolf inside him restless. The events of the past nights weighed heavily on him. The shadow wolf's attacks, the awakening of the curse, and the realization that the woman beside him, Lady Alara, was not just a bride by contract, but the key to everything. Alara stood at the edge of the balcony, her hands resting lightly on the cold stone. The wind tugged at her hair, and the silver moonlight made her glow like a beacon in the dark night. She had spent hours studying the ancient texts, preparing herself for the moment when she and Kalen would confront the Shadow Wolf one last time. Her magic pulsed through her veins, strong, responsive, and alive. Yet she knew that power alone would not be enough. Courage, trust, and unity would be their greatest weapons. Kalen approached her quietly. The wolf within him stirred at the sight of her, muscles tensing as instinct and admiration battled inside him. "Alara," he said softly. She turned, meeting his amber gaze with calm determination. "Kalen," she replied. "It is time. We cannot delay any longer. The curse grows stronger with every moment we wait." Kalen nodded, the wolf inside him growling low in agreement. "Then we face it together," he said, reaching for her hand. Their fingers intertwined, a silent pledge of trust and unity. In that touch, the wolf kneaded at his chest, sensing the bond that had formed between them, a bond older than fear, stronger than darkness. They moved through the palace corridors, the shadows thickening around them. The castle itself seemed to react to their presence, creaking, groaning, and whispering secrets long buried. Clara's magic glowed faintly, illuminating the way, while Kalen's instincts guided them with a precision born of centuries of vigilance. In the throne room, the air was heavy with tension. The Shadow Wolf had returned, larger, darker, more fearsome than before. Its crimson eyes glowed like embers, and its form was fluid, twisting with unnatural power. The curse had fully awakened, feeding on the fear and doubt that lingered in the castle's walls. Kalen stepped forward, shifting subtly, the wolf within him, surfacing. His amber eyes burned with intensity, and his muscles coiled like springs ready to strike. "We end this tonight," he growled. Alara raised her hands, silver light flowing from her fingers, weaving a barrier around them. "We end this together," she corrected softly. The Shadow Wolf circled, hissing, testing their resolve. Kalen's eyes met Alara's, and in that glance they shared more than words could convey. Fear, trust, and the unspoken acknowledgement that they could not falter, that neither could survive without the other. Then the creature attacked. Kalen moved first, striking with speed and strength that blurred the line between man and wolf. His claws caught the edge of the Shadow Wolf's form, tearing through darkness like a blade through silk. The beast hissed, retaliating with tendrils of shadow that whipped through the air, seeking to bind him. Alara's magic flared, her silver light meeting the darkness with a force that made the castle tremble. She chanted softly, words of old power, her energy flowing into Kalen, strengthening his strikes, shielding him from the shadow's fury. The two moved as one, a perfect dance of instinct, magic, and courage. Yet the Shadow Wolf was relentless. It lunged at Kalen, forcing him to defend himself while simultaneously protecting Alara. One strike caught him off guard, and he stumbled, the wolf within him snarling in frustration and fear. "Alara!" he growled, his amber eyes wide. She did not hesitate. Her magic surged, forming a wall of silver light between Kalen and the Shadow Wolf. The creature recoiled, momentarily stunned, giving Kalen the chance to regain his footing. His chest heaved, the wolf within him growling low and wary. "We can do this," Alara said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "Together. Trust me." Kaelin met her gaze, seeing the courage and determination reflected there. The wolf inside him tilted its head, sensing the truth of her words. He nodded once, and in that instant they acted as one. Kaelin struck with precise, controlled fury, while Alara's magic formed a radiant cage of silver light around the shadow wolf. The beast roared, twisting and writhing, but it could not escape. The magic fed on the bond between them, responding to trust and unity rather than fear. With a final, desperate howl, the shadow wolf dissolved into mist, vanishing into the forest beyond the castle walls. Silence fell over the throne room, broken only by the soft hum of Alara's magic fading and Kaelin's heavy breaths. For a long moment, neither moved. The danger was over, the curse broken, or at least contained for now. And yet, something had changed. The castle itself seemed lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. The shadows that had haunted the walls receded, leaving only the soft glow of moonlight and the faint scent of magic lingering in the air. Kaelin lowered his hands, the wolf within him retreating, leaving behind a restless energy. He turned to Alara, his amber eyes softer now, filled with admiration, gratitude, and something deeper he had never allowed himself to feel before. "You are extraordinary," he said quietly. "I have never known anyone like you." Alara's cheeks warmed. "And you are more than I imagined, Kaelin," she replied. "Strong, fierce, and capable of something gentle, too." The wolf inside him growled softly, sensing the tenderness in her words, acknowledging the bond that had formed between them. For the first time, Kaelin did not feel the need to dominate or control. He felt only a desire to protect, to cherish, and to honor the woman standing before him. He stepped closer, bowing his head slightly. "Elara," he whispered, "if it were not for the curse, for the shadow, I might never have known what it is to feel like this." Elara reached out, placing her hand over his. "The shadow brought us together, Kaelin, and it taught us something important. Strength is not just in power, but in trust, in unity, in love." The wolf inside him purred low, a sound of approval, of reverence, kneeling in the presence of her courage and heart. And Kaelin, man and wolf in one, bowed his head, kneeling before her, not in submission, but in acknowledgement of the bond that had changed him forever. Elara placed her hands gently on his shoulders, her eyes shining in the moonlight. "Rise, Kaelin," she said softly. "We are equals now. Not king and subject, not man and woman. Partners. Together, we face the future." He rose slowly, his amber eyes locking with hers, the wolf inside him calm and at peace. For the first time in years, he felt whole, not because of power, not because of fear, but because of trust, love, and the courage of the woman who had entered his life as a bride by contract and had become the anchor of his soul. Outside, the forest stirred, but there was no threat now. The shadow wolf had been vanquished, and the ancient curse contained. The wind carried whispers of old magic, acknowledging the union of strength and courage, the bond that had restored balance to the Wolfen court. Kaelin and Alara stood together on the balcony, the moonlight bathing them in silver. For the first time, they did not see shadows, only light. The palace, once a place of whispers and fear, seemed alive with hope, with the promise of a new beginning. "I never thought a contract could bring something like this," Kalen said softly, his hand brushing hers. Elara smiled, her eyes reflecting the moon. "Neither did I, but perhaps some things are meant to be, not because of duty, but because of the heart." Kalen's wolf growled softly in agreement, the sound gentle, almost affectionate. It had kneeling once, in awe of the woman who had awakened the man within the beast. And now it prowled silently, content in the knowledge that this bond, forged in darkness and danger, would endure. The castle was quiet, the shadows gone, and the wolfen court bathed in the silver glow of the moon. The king and his bride stood together, not as ruler and subject, not as predator and prey, but as equals, bound by trust, courage, and the unspoken understanding that had grown between them. Somewhere in the forest, the faintest whisper of the past remained, a reminder that darkness always waits. But for Kalen and Alara, the future was theirs to shape, a life of shared strength, hope, and love, forged in shadow and tempered in light. The moon reached its zenith, casting a silver crown upon the king and the woman who had captured his heart. And for the first time, Kalen felt the true meaning of his title, not Alpha King of Wolfen Court, but protector, partner, and lover of the woman who had brought light to the darkness of his soul. Together they faced the night, not as king and bride, not as wolf and woman, but as two hearts bound forever, ready to face any shadow that might dare to rise again.